Richard Cole had everything money could buy except hope. His twin daughters, Clara and Luna, lay silent in their cribs, trapped in bodies that wouldn't move and voices that wouldn't come. For 2 years, specialists promised nothing would change. Then Amara Daniels arrived, a maid with no medical degree but a secret connection to Richard's late wife that no one could have predicted. What Richard discovered her doing in the nursery 3 weeks later would either destroy his family's reputation or prove that the greatest miracles don't come from science. She knelt on the floor, whispered a promise to his daughters, and everything changed. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The mansion stood like a monument to everything money could buy and nothing it could fix. Richard Cole's estate sprawled across 15 acres of manicured lawns outside Boston, with marble fountains that sparkled in the afternoon sun and gardens that bloomed in perfect seasonal rotation. Inside, silence pressed against the walls like a living thing, broken only by the echo of footsteps on Italian tile and the distant hum of medical equipment. Richard sat in his study, staring at blueprints he wasn't really seeing. At 43, he looked older than his years, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines carved deep around his eyes. His late wife Elena smiled at him from a silver frame on his desk, frozen in a moment of joy he could barely remember feeling himself. She had died bringing their daughters into the world, and some days he wondered if God had taken the wrong parent. Clara and Luna, his twin daughters. 2 years old now, with Elena's delicate features and his own dark eyes. Eyes that looked but never seemed to see anything that mattered. Eyes that watched the world from bodies that wouldn't obey them. The doctors had explained it in careful, clinical terms. A rare neurological condition, they said, something that happened during development in the womb. The pathways between brain and body hadn't formed correctly. The girls couldn't walk, couldn't control their movements with any real purpose, and they couldn't speak. Not a word, not a sound beyond the occasional tuneless hum or whimper. Richard had thrown money at the problem like a man trying to fill an ocean with buckets. The best neurologists from Johns Hopkins, specialists from Switzerland, experimental therapies from research hospitals most people had never heard of. Nothing changed. The twins lay in their custom cribs, staring at ceilings, drooling slightly, their small bodies trapped in a prison no amount of wealth could unlock. He avoided going home most days. His office downtown became his refuge, and the charitable hospitals he funded became his penance. The Cole Foundation built pediatric wings and research centers, donated millions to children's medicine. People called him a hero. If they only knew the truth. Every ribbon he cut, every plaque with his name on it, felt like a monument to his failure. He could save 1,000 children, but not his own. Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, knocked sharply on the study door. She was a severe woman in her 60s, all sharp angles and starched uniforms, who ran the household like a military operation. "Mr. Cole, the new girl is here for her first day." Richard glanced up. "New girl?" "The maid. The one the agency sent. Amara Daniels." Mrs. Patterson's tone carried a hint of disapproval. "She seems rather young, and soft if you ask me." He hadn't asked, but Mrs. Patterson had opinions about everything. "Fine. Show her what needs doing." "Of course, sir." She paused at the door. "Will you be dining at home this evening?" "No, I have a board meeting." It was a lie. He had nothing scheduled. But the thought of sitting in that enormous dining room, listening to the silence interrupted only by the sound of his own cutlery, made his chest tight. Amara Daniels stood in the servants' entrance, taking in the scope of the house with quiet amazement. At 29, she had cleaned plenty of homes. But nothing like this. This wasn't a house. It was a palace. Chandeliers dripped crystal light over everything, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Mrs. Patterson appeared, clipboard in hand, already looking skeptical. "You're the new girl?" "Yes, ma'am. Amara Daniels." "Well, Miss Daniels, we maintain very high standards here. Mr. Cole expects perfection. You'll be responsible for the East Wing, the main corridors, and the children's areas." Amara nodded, trying to absorb it all. "The children?" "Mr. Cole's twin daughters. They're disabled. Various nurses and therapists handle their care. You're only responsible for keeping their spaces clean. Don't touch the medical equipment, and don't interfere with the specialists." Something in Mrs. Patterson's tone struck Amara as odd, cold almost, like the children were problems to be managed, rather than people to be loved. "How old are they?" 2 years. They don't walk, don't talk. Very sad situation." Mrs. Patterson said it like she was describing broken furniture. "This way." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms Amara glimpsed through open doors. A library with floor-to-ceiling books. A music room with a grand piano gathering dust. A sitting room that looked like nobody had ever sat in it. Everything beautiful. Everything empty. The nursery was in the East Wing, behind double doors painted soft cream. When Mrs. Patterson pushed them open, Amara's breath caught. 2 cribs stood side by side near tall windows overlooking the gardens. The afternoon light painted everything gold. Between the cribs, medical monitors blinked quietly. A changing table, a rocking chair, shelves full of toys that looked untouched. And in the cribs, 2 small figures lay on their backs, staring upward. "That's Clara on the left, Luna on the right," Mrs. Patterson said. "Their nurse will be back shortly. Just clean around them. They don't notice much anyway." Amara barely heard her. She moved closer to the cribs, her heart doing something strange in her chest. The twins were beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. They had dark curls spread across their pillows, skin like porcelain, and eyes that seemed enormous in their small faces. Clara's gaze drifted toward the window. Luna hummed tunelessly, her tiny fingers twitching against the blanket. Without thinking, Amara knelt beside Luna's crib, bringing herself to eye level. "Hello there, sweet girl," she said softly. Luna's humming stopped. Her eyes slowly tracked toward Amara's voice. "We'll talk someday, little ladies," Amara whispered, glancing between them both. "Even if the world says you can't." "Miss Daniels," Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp, "we don't encourage false hope here. Please stick to your duties." Amara stood, but something had shifted inside her. She'd seen that look before, the way Luna's eyes had focused on her face. She'd seen it in her mother's eyes during the final months of her illness, when words had failed, but understanding remained. These girls weren't absent. They were trapped. Over the next few days, Amara learned the rhythms of the house. She learned that Mr. Cole left before dawn and returned after dark. That the nurses and therapists came and went on strict schedules, performing exercises on the twins with clinical efficiency, but little warmth. That the rest of the staff avoided the nursery, unless absolutely necessary. She learned that Mr. Cole's wife had died the day the twins were born. That before her death, Elena Cole had been a pianist and a painter, vibrant and full of life. Now her memory haunted the halls like perfume that wouldn't fade. Amara started humming while she worked. Not consciously at first, just old songs her mother had sung to her. Gospel tunes and lullabies, melodies that felt like comfort in physical form. She hummed, while mopping the hallway outside the nursery, while dusting the bookshelves in the twins' playroom, while folding their tiny clothes. And she noticed things. The way Clara's fingers would tap against the crib railing when she hummed. The way Luna's breathing would sync with the rhythm. Small things. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. One afternoon, she was in the playroom reorganizing toys when she started humming again. The same melody she'd been unconsciously repeating for days. Behind her, she heard a sound. A soft clap. She turned. Luna was in her adaptive chair, her small hands pressed together. Once. Twice. Not random spasms. It matched the beat of Amara's humming. Then Clara blinked. Not a regular blink. 2 deliberate blinks, one after another, her eyes locked on Amara's face. Amara's heart hammered. She moved closer, keeping her movements slow and calm. "Can you do that again, sweetheart? Can you clap for me?" She hummed 2 beats. Luna's hands came together twice. "Oh my God," Amara breathed. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and started recording. She hummed again, and again the twins responded. Clara with her blinking, Luna with her clapping. Coordinated. Intentional. "What are you doing?" Amara jumped. The lead nurse, Ms. Carson, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. She was a woman in her 50s who wore authority like armor. "I was just," they were responding to. "You were interfering." Ms. Carson crossed the room and took Luna's chair, wheeling it away. "You're here to clean, Miss Daniels, not to play therapist. These children have very specific care plans developed by actual medical professionals." But they were responding. "Look, I have it on video. Spasms, coincidental movements. I've been a pediatric nurse for 25 years. I know the difference between communication and involuntary reflexes." Ms. Carson's tone left no room for argument. "If I catch you disrupting their routine again, I'll report you to Mr. Cole." Amara's face burned. "Yes, ma'am." That evening, she was gathering her things to leave when Mr. Cole appeared in the corridor. She'd seen him in passing, but this was the first time they'd really been in the same space. He looked exhausted, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie loosened. "Miss Daniels." She stopped. "Yes, sir." "Ms. Carson tells me you've been overstepping your duties." The words hit like a slap. "Sir, I apologize, but I think my daughters are being cared for by trained specialists." He cut her off, his voice flat. "Your job is to clean, not to develop theories, not to interfere with their therapy, and certainly not to give me false hope about conditions that will never change. Is that clear?" Amara's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to show him the video, to make him see what she'd seen. But the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Defeat. The look of a man who'd already given up. "Yes, sir. Crystal clear." "Good. This is not a charity house. Everyone here has a specific role. Please remember yours." He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the marble hall, and Amara stood there feeling smaller than she had in years. She almost quit that night, sat in her tiny apartment and stared at her phone, the resignation already half-written in her head. What was the point of staying where she wasn't wanted, where her observations were dismissed as delusion? But she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Luna's hands clapping, Clara's deliberate blinks. That wasn't reflex. That was connection. Around midnight, she returned to the mansion. The night security guard knew her by now and let her in without question. The house felt different in the dark, less imposing somehow, more honest. She found herself wandering, not really sure what she was looking for. The music room drew her. She'd dusted the piano before, admired the framed photographs on the wall. Elena Cole, at various ages, always at the piano. Elena as a young woman winning a competition. Elena on her wedding day. Elena pregnant, glowing, her hands resting on her belly. Amara touched the piano keys gently, not pressing hard enough to make sound. She noticed a small drawer in the bench and opened it. Inside was a leather journal, worn, well-loved, filled with Elena's handwriting. Amara knew she shouldn't read it, knew it was private. But her hands opened it anyway. The entries started during Elena's pregnancy. Excitement, fear, hope, then diagnosis. The doctors explaining what the tests showed, the twins' condition. Elena's desperation to find ways to help them. And then, on a page marked with a dried flower, drawings, simple sketches of hands forming shapes. Next to each one, labels in Elena's graceful script. I love you. Hungry. Sleep. Mama. Sign language. Amara's heart stopped. She flipped through more pages. Elena had been teaching herself American Sign Language, planning to teach her daughters, planning to give them a voice even if they couldn't speak. The last entry was dated 2 days before Elena's death. If they can't form words with their mouths, we'll form them with our hands. My beautiful girls will talk to me. I know they will. I'll start the day they come home. But Elena never came home, and her plan died with her. Amara closed the journal carefully, resting it against her chest. She sat in that dark music room for a long time, feeling Elena's presence like a whisper. The woman who'd carried these babies, who'd refused to give up on them, who'd seen them as whole people even before they were born. When dawn started breaking through the windows, Amara made her decision. She stood, placed the journal back in the bench, and walked to the nursery where the twins still slept. I'll finish what your mama started, she whispered, looking at their peaceful faces. I promise you that, whether your daddy wants me to or not. The decision changed everything, though on the surface, nothing looked different. Amara still arrived each morning at 7, still wore her plain uniform, still carried her cleaning supplies through the mansion's endless corridors. But now she moved with purpose that went beyond dusting and mopping. She'd spent the night after finding Elena's journal researching. Her laptop glowed in her small apartment until 3 in the morning while she watched video after video about American Sign Language, about alternative communication methods for children with neurological conditions, about the connection between rhythm, music, and brain development. Her own mother had taught her some of this before she died, before Amara had to drop out of nursing school to become a full-time caregiver, learning to communicate with someone whose stroke had stolen her words. She understood trapped minds. She understood the desperation of wanting to connect. Now, during the quiet moments when the nurses took breaks and the therapists worked in other parts of the house, Amara began. Simple signs, basic concepts. She'd clean the windows in the nursery, and while the sunlight streamed in, she'd sign sun with her hand, the ASL gesture of spreading fingers from a fist. She'd do it over and over, speaking the word aloud simultaneously. Sun, she'd say, showing them the sign, then pointing to the window. Sun. At first, the twins just stared, but Amara was patient. She'd learned patience in the long months watching her mother struggle to communicate, celebrating the smallest victories. A squeeze of the hand, a purposeful blink, understanding existing even when expression failed. She signed music before humming. Mama, when she found photographs of Elena. Safe, when she held them during their scheduled repositioning. The nurses would give her odd looks, but they were too busy with their charts and procedures to really pay attention to what the maid was doing. 10 days into her secret lessons, something shifted. Amara was signing music before beginning her familiar hum, and Clara's hand twitched. Not a spasm. A movement that tried to copy the gesture. Her fingers attempted to spread, to form the sign, even though her muscles wouldn't fully cooperate. Amara's breath caught. Yes, she whispered. Yes, sweet girl. Music. Can you try again? She made the sign slowly. Clara's hand trembled and tried to mirror it. Luna's eyes tracked the movement with intense focus. They were learning. But not everyone was blind to what was happening. Mr. Hawthorne, the butler, was a man who'd worked for the Cole family for 15 years. He prided himself on knowing everything that occurred under this roof, and he didn't like mysteries, especially mysteries involving the help. He'd noticed the maid spending longer than necessary in the nursery, noticed her making strange hand movements, noticed the way she'd hold those children differently than the nurses did, with something that looked almost like love. It made him suspicious. In his experience, people didn't do things out of the goodness of their hearts. Everyone had an angle. And this Amara Daniels, with her soft voice and patient ways, must be working some angle. Perhaps hoping to endear herself to Mr. Cole, to work her way into his grieving heart and his substantial bank account. He began keeping notes, times, dates, observations, building a case to present to Mr. Cole when the moment was right. The thunderstorm came on a Tuesday evening. Amara had worked late, helping prepare for a charity event the following week. The sky had darkened steadily all afternoon, and by 8 o'clock, rain hammered against the windows like it wanted inside. She was finishing in the nursery when the first crack of thunder split the sky. The lights flickered. Both twins startled, Luna letting out a thin cry. The night nurse had stepped out for her dinner break, leaving Amara alone with them. Another boom of thunder, louder this time. Clara began whimpering. Luna's cry grew more distressed. Amara moved quickly, going to Luna's crib first, lifting the small girl carefully. She'd learned how to hold them properly by watching the nurses, supporting their heads and bodies. "Shh, shh, it's okay," she murmured, settling into the rocking chair with Luna against her chest. Lightning flashed, painting the room white for an instant. "You're safe, sweet girl. You're safe." She began signing against Luna's body where the child could feel the movement, even if she couldn't see it. The sign for safe, one hand crossing over the other at the wrists, like a protective shield. "Safe," Amara said aloud, making the sign. "Safe. I've got you." Thunder rolled again, and Luna whimpered. But then, something extraordinary happened. The small girl's hands, resting against Amara's arm, moved. Trembling, uncertain, but deliberate. She crossed one wrist over the other. "Safe." Luna had signed safe. Amara's eyes flooded with tears. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, baby girl, that's right, safe." And then Luna made a sound. Not a cry or a hum. A sound that shaped itself toward a word. A soft, breathy, "ah-ma." The door opened. Mr. Cole stood frozen in the doorway, rain-soaked, his briefcase hanging from one hand. He'd come home early because of the storm, some instinct pulling him toward his daughters. And now he stood staring at a scene he couldn't quite process. The maid in the rocking chair, tears streaming down her face, his daughter in her arms. And his daughter making sounds. Intentional sounds. "What are you doing?" His voice came out harsh, defensive. Amara looked up, still cradling Luna. "Sir," she signed. She signed safe. And she tried to say, "Stop." He crossed the room in 3 strides. "Give her to me. Mr. Cole, please, if you'd just look." I said, "Stop gesturing nonsense at my daughter." He took Luna from her arms and the child immediately began crying again. "Confusing them with your games, making them think they can do things they can't. But she did do it. Sir, your girls are trying to talk to you. Out." His voice was quiet but absolute. "Get out of this room now." Amara stood on shaking legs. She wanted to argue, to make him see, but the grief and anger in his face silenced her. She walked to the door, then paused. "Your wife knew," she said softly. "She knew they could communicate. She was planning to teach them. Before she died." Richard's face went pale. "What?" "Ask yourself why you're so afraid of hope, Mr. Cole. Ask yourself who that fear really serves." She left before he could respond. The next morning, Dr. Harrison made his monthly visit. He was the neurologist who'd been following the twins' case since birth, a kind man in his 60s who'd delivered more bad news than good in his career. He performed his standard examinations, checking reflexes, responses, muscle tone. "Same as last time," he told Richard in the study afterward. No deterioration, which is good, but no improvement either. I'm sorry. Richard. The maid says they're communicating. Richard said it like he was confessing something shameful. She claims they're responding to sign language, that one of them tried to speak. Dr. Harrison's expression remained carefully neutral. Richard, we've discussed this. Sometimes caregivers become emotionally attached and see patterns that aren't really there. Wishful thinking. It's natural, but she seemed very certain. Involuntary mimicry can look like communication. The girls might move their hands randomly while she's gesturing, and coincidence looks like cause and effect. Dr. Harrison leaned forward kindly. I know how much you want things to be different. We all do. But false hope can be more cruel than accepting reality. Richard nodded slowly. That night he called Amara into his study. She stood before his desk, hands clasped, waiting. He looked tired, older somehow. Dr. Harrison was here today. Yes, sir. He explained that what you think you're seeing is likely random movement, coincidence. Richard's voice was gentle but firm. I appreciate your compassion, Miss Daniels, truly. But I need you to stop the sign language games. They're not helping. With respect, sir, how do you know they're not helping if you've barely tried? His jaw tightened. Because every expert I've consulted has told me the same thing. My daughters have severe limitations. Those limitations are permanent, and filling my head with fantasies about them learning sign language or saying words serves no purpose except to make the truth more painful. What if the truth is different than what those experts think? Then they'd have shown improvement in 2 years. He stood, walking to the window. I've accepted what is, Miss Daniels. I suggest you do the same. No more signing. No more special attention. Do your job as you were hired to do, or I'll need to find someone who will. Amara left that meeting with her throat tight and her eyes burning. She wanted to shake him, to make him see what he was throwing away. But she understood his fear, too. She'd seen it in families at the hospital, in her own reflection when her mother was dying. Hope was terrifying because hope could break you worse than grief ever could. That night, she couldn't stay away. After the household slept, she crept back to the nursery, moving silently through darkened halls. She settled on the floor between the 2 cribs, close enough to see the twins' sleeping faces in the glow of the nightlight. I won't give up on you, she whispered. I promise. She began signing and humming softly, a song her mother had sung to her, an old spiritual about holding on. She'd sung it to her mother in those final weeks when words had failed, but music still reached through. The melody drifted through the quiet room, and Amara's hands moved through the signs she'd been teaching them. Sun. Music. Mama. Safe. Luna's eyes opened first, then Clara's. In the dim light, both twins looked at her with an awareness that seemed impossible. And then, in a moment, Amara would remember for the rest of her life. Luna hummed. Not her usual tuneless sound. She hummed the melody Amara was singing, the exact tune, the exact rhythm. Amara's hands stilled. Oh my God, she breathed. Clara's mouth opened and a sound emerged, thin, shaky, but shaped. Ha. Say it again, Amara whispered, moving closer. Please, sweetheart, try again. Ma. The sound hung in the air like a miracle. Amara grabbed her phone with shaking hands and hit record. She hummed again, and Luna echoed her. She signed, Mama, and Clara's hands twitched, trying to copy the gesture. Amara recorded it all, tears streaming down her face. But even as she captured this impossible moment, fear crept in. What would happen when Richard saw this? Would he accuse her of tricks, of manipulating his daughters? Would he fire her before the girls could show him what they were becoming? She saved the video but didn't send it to anyone. Not yet. The evidence felt too precious, too fragile. In the darkness of the nursery, holding her phone with its impossible proof, Amara made a choice. She would continue the lessons in secret. Every night after the house slept, she would return to this room and speak to these girls in the language their mother had wanted to teach them. If Richard Cole wouldn't give them a chance, she would. What she didn't know was that across the hall, Richard lay awake in his bedroom. He'd heard humming, soft but distinct, and beneath it, sounds he didn't want to acknowledge. Sounds that might have been his daughter's voices, trying to form words they weren't supposed to be able to say. He pulled a pillow over his head, blocking it out. Because if what he was hearing was real, it meant he'd been wrong. It meant he'd given up when he shouldn't have. It meant the maid he'd dismissed and scolded had seen something in his daughters that he'd been too broken to see himself. And that truth was more painful than any storm. The changes came slowly at first, then all at once. Within 3 weeks of Amara's secret nighttime lessons, the mansion began to sound different. The silence that had pressed against the walls for 2 years started cracking, letting in small noises that made the staff pause in their work and look at each other with uncertain expressions. Laughter, dry and raspy, like wind through old leaves, but unmistakably laughter. It happened first on a Tuesday morning. One of the day nurses was changing Clara's position when she dropped a rubber toy. It bounced twice, making a silly squeaking sound, and Clara's mouth opened. The laugh that came out was brief and broken, but real. The nurse stood frozen, the toy forgotten in her hand. By that afternoon, word had spread through the household. The twins were making sounds, not just random humming anymore, but responses. When music played on the therapy room's speaker, Luna would clap her hands together, off rhythm, but purposeful. When the physical therapist worked with Clara, the girl would tap her fingers against the mat in patterns that almost seemed deliberate. And sometimes, when no one was looking directly at them, the twins would crawl. Not well, not far, but they moved toward sounds that interested them. The jingle of keys, the scrape of a chair, the distant notes of the piano that no one had played since Elena died. The household staff noticed, but fear kept most of them quiet. Fear of being wrong, fear of false hope, fear of Mr. Cole's reaction if they mentioned it. Only the cook, an older woman named Betty, dared to speak about it openly. "Those babies are waking up," she said one afternoon in the kitchen, her voice certain. "Whatever's happening, something's bringing them back to us." But not everyone saw it as a blessing. Some of the staff grew resentful. Whispered conversations happened in corners, behind closed doors. Amara became the focus of their suspicion. "She's doing something," one maid muttered to another. "Something unnatural. My grandmother always said some folks have gifts they shouldn't use. Maybe she's after the money," someone else suggested. "Playing the long game. Make herself seem special, get the boss to notice her." The rumors spread like mold in dark places, and Amara felt their weight even when no one spoke directly to her. She'd catch looks, cold and calculating. She'd hear conversations stop when she entered a room. Mr. Hawthorne watched her constantly now, his disapproval carved into every line of his face. She said nothing. Let them think what they wanted. All that mattered were Clara and Luna. The breakthrough came during a moment no one was prepared for. Richard was hosting a potential investor, showing him through the mansion's art collection. They were in the East Gallery when sounds drifted from the nearby playroom. Music, children's voices attempting to sing along. The investor, a man named Thomas Brennan, paused. "I didn't know you had other children here." "I don't," Richard said shortly. "But those voices." Richard walked quickly toward the playroom, Brennan following. When he opened the door, the scene inside stopped him cold. Amara sat on the floor with both twins. A children's video played on a tablet, something with bright colors and simple songs. And the girls were responding. Clara's mouth moved, trying to form the words. Luna's hands clapped in rhythm. When Amara signed along with the video, both twins attempted to copy her gestures. "Remarkable," Brennan breathed. "I thought you said they were severely disabled." "They are." Richard's voice came out strangled. "They don't look disabled to me. They look like they're learning." Amara finally noticed them in the doorway. She stood quickly, suddenly aware of how this looked. Richard's face had gone pale, his jaw tight. "Mr. Cole, I can explain. My office. Now." He turned to Brennan with a forced smile. "I apologize. There's something I need to attend to. My assistant will show you out." 5 minutes later, Amara stood before his desk while Richard paced like a caged animal. "What were you doing?" "Teaching them. Sir, they're learning. If you just watch—" "I told you to stop." His voice rose. "I specifically instructed you to stop filling their heads with false hope. It's not false. They're communicating. They're laughing. Clara crawled yesterday, actually crawled toward the sound of music. Luna is signing 6 different words now. 6. Coincidence. Reflexes. You're lying to yourself." The words came out before Amara could stop them. "You know what you just saw. You know it was real." Richard's hand slammed on the desk. "You are staff. You are a maid in my house. You don't get to tell me what I know about my own daughters. Then maybe you don't know them at all." The silence stretched between them, dangerous and electric. Richard's face flushed with anger and something else. Something that looked like fear. "Clean out your things. You're fired." Amara's stomach dropped. "Sir, please. I will not have my daughters used as experiments by someone with no medical training and delusions of grandeur. Get out of my house." She wanted to argue, to fight, to make him see. But the look in his eyes told her it would be useless. He'd made his choice, and it was the same choice he'd been making since the day his daughters were born. The choice to protect himself from hope. Upstairs, as if sensing something was wrong, the twins began to cry. That evening, Dr. Harrison received an urgent call from Richard. When he arrived, Richard led him directly to the nursery, where the twins lay in their cribs, their faces blotchy from tears. "Examine them," Richard demanded. "Tell me what you see." Dr. Harrison performed his usual tests, but this time something in his expression shifted. He watched Luna track a toy with her eyes, observed Clara's fingers grip his hand when he offered it. Listened to the sounds they made, not quite words, but not random either. When they returned to the study, the doctor's face was troubled. "Richard, I need to be honest with you. Something has changed." "Changed how?" "Their motor responses, their neural engagement. I'm seeing coordinated movement that wasn't there 3 months ago." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Their latest scans show neuronal activity in areas we'd assumed were dormant. Something is triggering new pathways." Richard sat down heavily. "The maid. She's been teaching them sign language against my orders. Has it been working?" "I don't know. Maybe. I can't tell what's real and what I'm imagining." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "Richard, listen to me. Whether it's the sign language or something else, if there's a trigger for neural development, we need to identify and continue it. This kind of rewiring, especially at their age, it's not impossible, but it's extremely rare. If someone has found a way to reach them, she's a maid. She has no credentials. Neither did the parents who first developed music therapy for autism. Neither did the mother who invented refrigerator blankets for premature babies." The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. "Sometimes the best medicine isn't what we learn in medical school. It's what we learn from paying attention." After Dr. Harrison left, Richard climbed the stairs to the nursery. The night nurse had gotten the twins settled, but they were still restless, making small, distressed sounds. He stood at the doorway, watching them in the dim light. When was the last time he'd really looked at them? Not at their limitations, not at what they represented about his failures, but at them, his daughters. Clara with Elena's nose, Luna with his own stubborn chin. Two complete people trapped in bodies that didn't work right, until recently. Until Amara. He moved closer to the cribs. Clara's eyes found him immediately, and something in her expression broke his heart. Awareness. Recognition. This was his daughter knowing her father, seeing him, even if she couldn't say his name. He tried to remember what Amara had been doing. The hand movements. Sign language. His hands felt clumsy and stupid as he attempted to form the gesture he'd seen. He didn't even know what it meant. But Luna's eyes widened. Her small hands came up, trembling, trying to copy his movement. And then a sound emerged from her throat. Da. Da. Richard's knees nearly gave out. He grabbed the edge of the crib to steady himself. What did you say? Da, da. Clearer this time. Definitely a word. Definitely intentional. Clara's mouth opened. Da. Da. The sound they made was imperfect and strained, but it was language. It was his children calling for him. He'd been so busy protecting himself from disappointment that he'd almost missed the miracle happening right in front of him. Richard picked up his phone with shaking hands and dialed. It rang 4 times before Amara answered, her voice wary. Hello? Where are you? Mr. Cole, I'm packing. You fired me. Don't pack, come back. The words tumbled out. Please, they just said da. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to help them, but you do. Please come back. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Amara arrived, Richard was still in the nursery, sitting on the floor between the cribs. She'd never seen him like this. Vulnerable. Lost. Show me, he said simply. Show me everything you've been doing. The next morning, Richard called an emergency meeting with his board of directors. 8 men and 2 women sat around the polished conference table in the downtown office, all wearing expressions of mild concern. Richard rarely called emergency meetings, and when he did, they usually involved millions of dollars. Philip Garrett, the board chairman, spoke first. Richard, what's this about? Your assistant said it was urgent. I need to address some rumors before they become problems. Richard stood at the head of the table, feeling like he was about to jump off a cliff. You may have heard stories about my daughters, about improvements in their condition. We've heard whispers, admitted Janet Palmer, the CFO. Something about a miracle maid? The phrase made Richard wince. Her name is Amara Daniels. She's been working with my daughters using alternative communication methods. Sign language, music therapy, emotional engagement. The results have been remarkable. How remarkable? Philip asked carefully. They're talking, or beginning to. They're moving purposefully. They're engaging with the world in ways the doctors said would never be possible. The board members exchanged glances. Philip cleared his throat. Richard, that's wonderful news, truly. But I'm not sure why this requires an emergency meeting. Because people are talking. And when people talk about me, they talk about the company. Cole Medical Technologies is built on credibility, on cutting-edge science and proven results. And now the story is that my disabled daughters are being healed by a domestic worker with no medical degree while our company's specialists stood by helplessly. The realization spread across their faces. Janet spoke first. It makes us look incompetent. Worse, said Marcus Webb, head of PR. It makes us look like frauds. If a maid can achieve what our neurologist couldn't, what does that say about the medical technology we're selling to hospitals worldwide? It says maybe we've been approaching disability all wrong, Richard countered. Maybe there's value in methods we've dismissed. Philip's expression hardened. Richard, I understand you're emotionally invested. These are your children. But you have to think about the optics. Our investors, our partners, they need to believe in our scientific approach. This story undermines everything we stand for. My daughter's lives are not about optics, but your company is. Philip leaned forward. We have a quarterly earnings call in 3 days. Our stock price is already volatile. If this story spreads, if people start questioning our expertise, we could lose millions, possibly billions. Marcus pulled out his tablet, showing headlines from gossip sites and local news. It's already starting. Look, Billionaire's miracle babies. Maid succeeds where million-dollar medicine failed. Love cures what science couldn't. Every one of these makes Cole Medical look like a joke. So what are you suggesting? Richard asked, though he already knew. Distance yourself from the narrative, Janet said. Send the girls to that facility in Switzerland, the one that specializes in neurological rehabilitation. Let proper medical professionals handle their care in a controlled environment. You want me to send my 2-year-old daughters to another country? We're suggesting, Philip said carefully, that you protect both your family and your company by ensuring your daughters receive the best possible care in a setting that can be properly documented and studied, away from gossip and media speculation. Richard looked around the table at these people he'd worked with for years. They weren't cruel. They were practical. They saw a problem and wanted to fix it the way they fixed everything, with money, strategy, and control. I'll think about it, he said finally. But when he returned home that afternoon and heard his daughter's laughter floating down the stairs, he knew what his answer would be. The board could think whatever they wanted. He'd spent 2 years letting other people tell him what was best for Clara and Luna. He was done with that. He found Amara in the playroom, both girls on the floor with her. Luna was using her hands to sign more, while Clara attempted to stack soft blocks. When they saw him, both girls' faces lit up. "Dada!" Luna called out, her voice thin but clear. "Pa," Clara added, her version of Papa. Richard's throat tightened. He'd missed the board meeting's entire afternoon session to come home for this, to watch his daughters be alive. That evening, he told Amara about the board's suggestion. They sat in the library while the girls napped, and he watched her face carefully as he explained about Switzerland, about the facility, about the pressure to move them away. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. "I want to tell them to go to hell." He laughed bitterly. "But it's not that simple. The company employs 3,000 people. If we lose investor confidence, if the stock crashes, those are real jobs, real families. So you choose the company over your daughters. That's not fair, isn't it?" Amara's eyes met his. "You built a medical empire while your babies lay in cribs thinking nobody loved them enough to try." The words hit like a physical blow. "I do love them." "Then show them. Not with money or facilities or specialists. Show them by staying, by learning their language, by being brave enough to hope even when hope is terrifying." She stood, heading for the door, then paused. "Your wife left you a message in that journal. She said they'd speak when they were loved without condition. That means accepting them even if the progress stops tomorrow, even if they never get better than they are right now. Can you do that?" After she left, Richard sat in the silence, thinking about Elena, about the last conversation they'd had before she went into labor. She'd been scared, knowing the risks, knowing the baby's diagnosis, but she'd smiled and said, "Whatever happens, promise me you'll love them exactly as they are." He'd promised, and then he'd spent 2 years breaking that promise. The next morning, he called Philip Garrett. "I'm not sending them to Switzerland. Richard, be reasonable. I'm keeping them here, with me, with Amara. Whatever happens to the stock price happens, but I'm not running anymore. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." He hung up before Philip could argue further. Then he went upstairs, asked Amara to teach him the signs she'd been using, and spent the rest of the morning on the floor with his daughters, learning how to say, "I love you," with his hands. But that afternoon, everything changed. A nurse came running down the stairs, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Cole, it's Luna. She's having a seizure." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Richard rode with Luna while Amara stayed with Clara, both of them watching the emergency vehicle disappear down the long driveway with lights flashing. At the hospital, doctors swarmed. Tests were ordered, scans completed. Finally, Dr. Harrison emerged with news. The seizure was caused by overstimulation. Her brain is rewiring itself rapidly, creating new pathways, but the process is putting enormous stress on her nervous system. It's like trying to rebuild a bridge while traffic is still crossing it. Will she be okay? We've stabilized her. But Richard, you need to consider slowing down the therapy. The progress she's making is remarkable, but it's also dangerous. Her brain needs time to adjust. Back home, Amara sat in the nursery with Clara while Luna spent the night under observation. She felt like she'd caused this, pushed too hard, wanted too much. And now one of these precious girls was paying the price. When Richard returned near midnight, he found her there, crying silently. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have been more careful." "No," he sat beside her. "This is what trying looks like. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's scary. But it's better than giving up." "Is it? If something happens to her, then we'll face it. Together." He took her hand, the gesture surprising them both. "Dr. Harrison says the therapy should continue, just more slowly. You didn't hurt her, Amara. You woke her up, and sometimes waking up is painful." They sat together in the dim nursery, hands clasped, until dawn broke through the windows and Luna came home, sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. The crisis had passed, but it had changed something between Richard and Amara. A line had been crossed. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They were two people fighting for the same cause, bound together by hope and fear in equal measure. The board's pressure continued, but Richard stopped taking their calls. His daughters had said their first words. They'd taken their first crawling steps. They'd laughed and cried and responded to love in ways that proved they'd been there all along, just waiting for someone to listen. And if the world wanted to call it a miracle, let them. Richard had finally learned that some miracles didn't come from medicine or money. Some came from a woman brave enough to kneel on the floor and promise two forgotten girls that they would talk someday. That promise was being kept. One sign, one sound, one breakthrough at a time. The video appeared online at 7 in the morning on a Thursday. Richard was drinking coffee in the kitchen when his phone started buzzing with notifications. Then it didn't stop. Calls, texts, emails, all flooding in at once. Betty the cook looked up from the stove, concerned. "Mr. Cole, everything all right?" He stared at his screen, watching a video he didn't remember anyone taking. It showed the nursery 2 days ago, Amara kneeling on the floor between both twins, Luna reaching toward her with trembling hands, Clara's mouth forming sounds, and then, clear as bells, both girls saying it together. "Ma. Ma." The video cut to them falling into Amara's arms, her tears visible on camera, their small voices repeating the word. The caption read, "Billionaire's paralyzed daughters call Maid Mama after being told they'd never speak. The miracle nobody expected." "Oh no," Richard breathed. Within an hour, the video had 50,000 views. By noon, 2 million. News vans appeared outside the estate gates before lunch. Richard's phone became useless, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of calls. His assistant called from the downtown office in a panic. "Sir, we're being flooded with media requests. CNN wants an interview. Good Morning America. The Today Show. Everyone wants to talk about the twins and Amara." Richard found Amara in the playroom, deliberately staying away from windows. She'd seen the news vans, too. The girls played on the floor between them, oblivious to the chaos their progress had created. Did you know someone was filming? He asked. No, I never wanted this. Any of this. Her voice was tight. They're not miracles for people to gawk at. They're children. I know. He sat beside her, watching Clara stack blocks while Luna signed more repeatedly. My PR team wants to do damage control, schedule interviews, control the narrative. What do you want to do? Protect them. From all of it. He gestured toward the distant sound of reporters shouting questions at his security guards. But I don't know how. What neither of them knew was that the video had been uploaded by one of the night nurses, a young woman named Sarah, who'd thought she was doing something beautiful. She'd seen the moment, recorded it on her phone, and shared it with the caption meant to celebrate a miracle. She had no idea what she'd unleashed. By that evening, donations were pouring into Richard's foundation. Strangers sent money with notes attached. For the miracle Maid, to help other children like Clara and Luna. Because love matters more than medicine. The foundation's bank account grew by hundreds of thousands in a single day. But with the love came hatred. Amara's social media accounts, which she rarely used, filled with messages. Some were supportive, many were vicious. She's using those babies for attention. Probably hurting them to make it look like progress. Why does she get credit for what doctors should be doing? She's trying to trap a billionaire, oldest trick in the book. Amara stopped reading after the first dozen. Richard's security team recommended she stay off all social media entirely. They also suggested she not leave the estate for a while. Some of the messages crossed the line from cruel to threatening. Richard watched his daughters make progress while the world tore itself apart, debating whether that progress was real. Physical therapists argued online about neural plasticity. Doctors published think pieces about placebo effects and parental wishful thinking. Disability rights advocates split into camps, some celebrating the girl's improvement, others angry about the implication that disabled children needed to be fixed to have value. The controversy hit Richard's company hard. Cole Medical Technologies' stock dropped 12% in 2 days. Investors were spooked. If a maid with no formal training could achieve results that the company's expensive technology couldn't, what did that say about their products? Philip Garrett called another emergency board meeting. This time, Richard attended via video conference, unwilling to leave the estate with reporters camped outside. This is becoming a disaster, Philip said without preamble. Our clients are questioning our credibility. 3 hospitals have postponed equipment orders pending further evaluation. People are donating to the foundation, Richard countered. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in 48 hours. Blood money, snapped Marcus Webb. They're donating because they think your maid performed a miracle. That makes our science look irrelevant. Do you understand what that does to our market position? Janet Palmer's voice was gentler, but no less serious. Richard, the board has been discussing options. We think the best course of action is for you to step down temporarily as CEO. Let someone else manage the company while you deal with your family situation. You're forcing me out. We're protecting the company, Philip corrected, and honestly, protecting you too. Right now, you're the story. Widower billionaire, disabled daughters, miracle maid. It's too much emotion. Business requires clearer thinking. Richard looked at the faces on his screen. These people had been his colleagues for years. Some he'd considered friends. Now they looked at him like he was a liability to be managed. I'll consider it, he said, and ended the call. That night he found Amara in the library. She sat by the window, a book unopened in her lap, staring out at the lights of the news vans in the distance. They want me to step down from the company, he said, pouring himself a drink he didn't really want. Will you? I don't know. Everything I've built is falling apart because my daughters learned to say mama. He laughed bitterly. How insane is that? Not insane. Just proof that people value the wrong things. She finally looked at him. Your company sells equipment. But what Clara and Luna needed wasn't equipment. It was attention. patience, love. And that doesn't come with a price tag, so it makes people uncomfortable. You sound like Elena. The words came out before he could stop them. She used to say things like that the best medicine was often the simplest. She was right. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Amara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. What is it? An email from someone who says they're a journalist. Her hands shook slightly as she read. They're threatening to publish a story about my past, about how I dropped out of nursing school, about my mother's medical bills I couldn't pay. They're framing it like I lied about my qualifications. Richard took the phone and read the email. It was polite, but pointed. The journalist had done their research. They had documents, records, proof that Amara had never finished her nursing degree. I never lied, Amara said quietly. I told Mrs. Patterson I had a nursing background, that I'd studied but didn't finish. But this makes it sound like fraud. It's not fraud. It's your life. Richard's jaw tightened. Who sent this? Someone named David Patterson. He writes for one of those investigative journalism sites. Richard recognized the name. Patterson was known for takedown pieces, the kind that destroyed reputations with carefully selected facts arranged to tell the worst possible story. If he published this, it would confirm every suspicious claim being made online. The Foundation's credibility would crumble. Amara would be painted as a con artist, and the twins' progress would be dismissed as coincidence or manipulation. I need to fix this, Richard said. How? I don't know yet, but I will. The story published 2 days later despite Richard's lawyer sending cease and desist letters. The headline read, Miracle Maid's Hidden Past, Questions about Credentials and Motives. It detailed Amara's unfinished education, her mother's death, the medical debt she'd accumulated and struggled to pay. It quoted anonymous sources saying she'd always been manipulative and overly ambitious. It suggested she might have fabricated the twins' progress to secure her position in a wealthy household. The internet erupted. Half the comments called for Amara's arrest. The other half defended her fiercely. Parents of disabled children posted videos saying their kids had responded to similar methods. Nurses and therapists argued about the validity of non-traditional approaches. The Foundation's phones rang constantly, some callers donating more money in solidarity, others demanding refunds. Amara stopped coming to work. She called Richard from her apartment, her voice hollow. I can't do this to them. Every day I'm there, I'm putting a target on your family. The girls don't need this stress, neither do you. You can't quit. I already have. I sent my resignation to Mrs. Patterson this morning. Amara, please, take care of them, Mr. Cole. Keep doing the signs. Keep talking to them. They're strong. They'll be okay. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry I brought all this chaos into your life. She hung up before he could respond. That evening, the twins knew something was wrong. They kept signing Ma and looking around the nursery, confusion clear on their small faces. Clara began crying, a thin wail that broke Richard's heart. Luna rocked back and forth, humming anxiously. She'll be back, Richard told them, but he didn't know if he was lying. She'll come back. Luna looked at him with Elena's eyes and signed Ma again. Then she opened her mouth and forced out words that took enormous effort. Ma, come, back. 3 words. The most she'd ever said at once, and she'd said them about Amara. Richard picked up his phone and started making calls. The nursing home records arrived via courier the next morning. Richard had called in favors, pushed his lawyers to work through the night, demanded access to files that had been archived for years. Now he sat in his study, reading through the documents that would change everything. Margaret Wilson, Amara's mother. She'd worked at Shady Brook Nursing Home from 2020 to 2023. And according to the employment records, one of her regular patients had been Elena Cole. Richard's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Care logs showed Margaret had been assigned to Elena during her final weeks. The two women had spent hours together. Margaret had been the one holding Elena's hand when she made her final care decisions. Had been there for the conversations about the babies, about their diagnosis, about Elena's desperate hope that they could still have full lives. A photograph slipped from between the pages. It showed Elena in a wheelchair, Margaret standing beside her. Both women were smiling. On Elena's lap was a book about sign language. Richard's chest tightened. This wasn't coincidence. The connection had been there all along, buried in files he'd never thought to look at. Amara's mother had been with his wife, had probably heard all of Elena's plans for the twins. And when Margaret was gone, her daughter had carried those plans forward. He found Amara's number and called. It rang 6 times before she answered. "Mr. Cole, I told you. Your mother was with Elena." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it would sound like I planned this, like I sought you out deliberately." Her voice was thick with emotion. "I didn't. When the agency sent me to your house, I had no idea it was you. No idea those were Elena's daughters. I hadn't even known your last name. My mother only ever called her Elena." "How much did your mother tell you?" "Everything. About the diagnosis, about how Elena researched every possible way to help them, about the sign language she was learning." Amara took a shaky breath. "My mother died 2 weeks after your wife did. The last thing she made me promise was that if I ever met children who needed Elena's methods, I'd use them. She said Elena's dream shouldn't die just because she did." Richard closed his eyes. 2 women, both gone too soon, both trying to help children they'd never get to see grow up. And their daughters had found each other by accident or fate or whatever you wanted to call it. "I'm coming to get you," he said. "Mr. Cole, Richard, call me Richard, and you're coming back. Not as a maid, as their caretaker, as family. Whatever this is, we're in it together now. The media will destroy us both. Let them try." He hung up and made another call, this time to his PR team. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'm making a statement." The press conference took place in front of the mansion at 10 a.m. Dozens of reporters crowded behind police barriers, cameras ready. Questions shouted over each other. Richard stood at a podium, refusing to look nervous even though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm going to tell you a story," he began, and the crowd quieted. "About 2 women who never met but were connected by love. About my late wife Elena, who spent her final days learning sign language because she believed her daughters deserved a voice. And about Margaret Wilson, the caretaker who held Elena's hand and learned those same signs alongside her." He explained it all. The nursing home connection, how Margaret had passed Elena's knowledge to her daughter, how Amara had walked into his house without knowing the connection existed, but had fulfilled both women's wishes anyway. The journalist who questioned Amara's credentials was right about one thing. Richard continued. "She's not a licensed nurse. She's something better. She's the continuation of a promise made by 2 dying women. She's proof that love doesn't end with death. It just finds new hands to hold." He pulled out the photograph of Elena and Margaret. Cameras clicked furiously as he held it up. "You want to call it a miracle? Fine. But the miracle isn't that my daughters are learning to communicate. The miracle is that Amara was brave enough to try when everyone else had given up. The miracle is that sometimes God answers prayers by sending us exactly who we need, exactly when we need them." The reporters erupted with questions, but Richard held up his hand. "I'm not taking questions. I'm making an announcement. I'm resigning as CEO of Cole Medical Technologies effective immediately. I'm transferring full ownership of the Elena Grace Foundation to a trust managed jointly by myself and Amara Daniels. And I'm dedicating the rest of my life to proving that the best medicine for broken bodies is often unbroken hearts. He stepped away from the podium, walked through the shouting crowd, and got into his car. 20 minutes later, he pulled up outside Amara's apartment building. She was waiting on the steps, a small bag beside her. When she saw him, tears streamed down her face. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He picked up her bag. "Come on, your daughters are waiting." The drive back to the mansion was quiet, comfortable, like two people who'd fought the same war and were finally going home. When they arrived, Mrs. Patterson met them at the door. For once, the severe woman's expression had softened. "The girls have been asking for her," she said simply. "Well, signing for her, all morning." They climbed the stairs together. When Richard pushed open the nursery door, both twins looked up from where the day nurse was trying to keep them entertained. The moment they saw Amara, their faces transformed. "Ma!" Luna called out. "Ma!" Clara echoed. Amara knelt, and both girls crawled toward her as fast as their improving bodies would allow. They crashed into her arms, a tangle of small limbs and delighted sounds. Clara pressed her face against Amara's neck. Luna patted her cheek with small hands, signing, "Stay," over and over. "I'm staying," Amara promised, her voice breaking. "I'm never leaving you again." Richard watched from the doorway, thinking about Elena, about how she'd loved these girls before they were born, how she'd refused to see their disabilities as endings, only as different beginnings. He wondered if she'd known somehow that this would happen, that her plan would survive through two women neither of them had expected. That night, after the girls were asleep, Richard found Amara in the library. She was looking at the photograph he'd shown at the press conference, touching her mother's face gently. "I miss her," she said quietly. "I miss Elena, too." He sat beside her. "But I think they'd be happy. Seeing this. Seeing us not give up on their dream. Your board must be furious." "Probably. I don't care anymore." He smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in years. "I spent 2 years trying to buy my way out of grief, building hospitals, funding research, anything to prove I wasn't a failure. But real healing doesn't come with a price tag. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. Your daughters did." "No." He turned to face her. "You taught me how to listen, how to hope, how to be the father Elena wanted me to be." His voice dropped. "You gave me my family back. I can never repay that." "You don't have to repay it. That's what love is." The word hung between them, complicated and true. They weren't in love, not romantically. Not yet. But they loved the same things, the same children, the same dream. And maybe that was enough to build something lasting. Upstairs, Luna stirred in her sleep and whispered a word. "Da-da." In the other crib, Clara responded. "Ma." 2 words, 2 people. A family that had been shattered and was slowly, miraculously learning to be whole again. The next morning, Richard began the legal process of making Amara the twins' legal guardian alongside him. Not a nanny, not an employee. Family. The headlines called it controversial. Some said he was moving too fast, making decisions based on emotion rather than reason. But when Clara took 3 steps without support for the first time, falling into Amara's waiting arms while Richard cheered, he knew he was making the only decision that mattered. The world could keep watching, keep judging, keep debating whether what was happening in this house was miracle or method, luck or love. Richard didn't care anymore. His daughters were talking. They were walking. They were alive in ways that mattered more than any medical definition. And the woman who'd helped them find their voices was standing beside him, permanent and unshakable, exactly where Elena's ghost had guided her to be. The Foundation's work would continue. The therapy methods would be studied, documented, shared with other families desperate for hope. But all of that was secondary. What mattered was the sound of laughter in the halls, the sight of small hands forming signs, the miracle of two little girls who were supposed to be silent, calling out to the people who loved them. Ma, Dada, more, play. 4 words that meant everything. 4 words that proved the world wrong. 4 words that started with death and ended with life, carried forward by hands that refused to forget, and hearts brave enough to try. The scandal broke on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after Richard's press conference. Amara woke to her phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. She'd moved into one of the guest suites at the mansion, no longer living in that cramped apartment across town. The room was beautiful, with views of the garden and morning light that painted everything gold. But the light couldn't chase away the darkness waiting on her screen. The headline glared at her. Miracle Maid lied about her past. Financial desperation or calculated fraud. Her stomach dropped. Another article. Another attack. But this one was different. This one had details that made her past sound sordid and suspicious. They'd found her unpaid medical bills from her mother's final months. Found the debt collector's letters. Found the fundraising page she'd started and abandoned when it raised barely $200. The article painted a picture of a desperate woman drowning in debt who'd latched onto a wealthy family's tragedy for her own gain. It quoted sources close to the family, saying Amara had always been calculating, had deliberately sought out the Cole household, had fabricated the twins' progress to secure her position. Every word was poison wrapped in truth. Yes, she'd had debt. Yes, she'd been desperate. But the rest was lies twisted around those facts until they looked like something ugly. By breakfast, the story had spread everywhere. Richard found her in the kitchen, staring at her untouched coffee while Betty the cook watched with concerned eyes. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. Everyone's seen it. Amara's voice was hollow. The foundation's website is down. Too much traffic, apparently. People demanding answers. Richard's jaw clenched. My lawyers are already drafting a response. It won't matter. They've decided who I am. A liar who preys on sick children. She looked up at him, her eyes red. Maybe you should distance yourself. Say I deceived you too. Protect the girls and the foundation. Absolutely not. Richard? No. He sat beside her, his voice fierce. I know who you are. I've watched you with Clara and Luna. I've seen you cry when they made progress and panic when they had setbacks. You don't fake that kind of love. The sponsors don't know that. They're already pulling funding. It was true. By noon, 3 major donors had withdrawn their support from the Elena Grace Foundation. The board, what remained of it after Richard's resignation, called an emergency meeting. Janet Palmer delivered the news via conference call, her voice sympathetic but firm. Richard, we're hemorrhaging credibility. The foundation's reputation is tied to Amara's, and right now, her reputation is toxic. Then we rebuild it. With what? Marcus Webb's voice cut through. We've lost half our funding in 6 hours. More will follow. The therapy centers we plan to open are on hold. The training programs are canceled. Everything we've built is collapsing because you trusted the wrong person. Richard's hand tightened on the phone. I didn't trust the wrong person. I'm looking at her right now, and she's more real than any of you ever were. He ended the call. That afternoon, Amara packed her belongings. Not because Richard asked her to, but because she couldn't bear to watch everything he'd built crumble because of her. She folded clothes carefully, fighting back tears, when small voices echoed from the doorway. Ma? Go? She turned to find both twins standing there. Actually standing, holding on to the doorframe for support, but upright on their own legs. Clara's face was scrunched with worry. Luna signed, "Stay," over and over, her small hands desperate. "Oh, babies." Amara knelt, and they stumbled toward her, falling into her arms. "I'm not leaving because I want to. I'm leaving because staying hurts your daddy." "No." Clara's voice was clearer than it had ever been. One simple word, but absolutely certain. "No go." Luna pulled back and looked at Amara with heartbreaking intensity. Then she did something she'd never done before. She signed a complete sentence, her small hands moving through the gestures with concentration. "We need you." 4 signs that broke Amara's heart and healed it simultaneously. She held them close, breathing in the baby shampoo smell of their hair, feeling their small hearts beating against her. Richard appeared in the doorway, having followed the girls. He took in the scene. Amara surrounded by half-packed bags, the twins clinging to her, all 3 of them crying. "They're right," he said quietly. "We do need you. The foundation can be rebuilt. You can't be replaced." He entered the room, sitting on the floor beside them. "I lost Elena. I almost lost these girls by giving up on them. I won't lose you too because some journalist decided to trade truth for clicks. You'll lose everything else. Then I'll lose it. But I'll lose it fighting for what matters." He reached out and took her hand. "Stay, please." That evening, while the twins slept, Richard did something he hadn't done since Elena's death. He played the piano. His fingers found the keys uncertainly at first, then with growing confidence. The melody was one Elena had loved, a soft piece that sounded like comfort in musical form. Amara found him there, drawn by the sound. She stood in the doorway, listening, watching his hands move across the keys. When he finished, silence filled the room like a question. "Elena used to play that when she was upset," he said. "She'd say music was the only language that never lied. It's beautiful. She was beautiful, in every way that mattered." He turned to face Amara. "And she'd be furious if she saw me giving up now. She hated quitters. I'm not asking you to quit. I'm asking you to be smart. Smart would have been sending the girls to Switzerland. Smart would have been firing you the first time you disobeyed my orders. Smart would have been listening to every expert who said they'd never improve." He stood, crossing to where she waited. "Thank God I stopped being smart and started being present." Thunder rumbled outside, distant but growing closer. Within minutes, rain began hammering against the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the mansion. "Circuit breaker probably tripped," Richard said. "I'll check it." They moved through the dark halls together, using phone flashlights to guide them. But before they reached the basement, thin cries echoed from upstairs. The twins, scared by the sudden darkness and thunder. They rushed back to the nursery. Both girls were sitting up in their cribs, calling out, "Ma! Da! Amara grabbed candles from the hallway closet while Richard lifted Luna. The candlelight cast gentle shadows across the room, turning everything soft and golden. Amara settled into the rocking chair with Clara, while Richard sat on the floor with Luna. The storm raged outside, but in this small circle of light, they were safe. "It's okay," Amara murmured, signing as she spoke. "Safe. We're here." Luna watched her hands, then mimicked the sign. "Safe." Clara pressed closer, her small hand finding Amara's. "Ma stay?" "Yes, baby." Ma stays. Richard watched them in the candlelight, these 3 people who'd become his whole world. The storm had cut the power, but it had also stripped away everything else. The opinions, the judgments, the outside noise. Here in the dark, there was only what mattered. His daughters, alive and growing. The woman who'd given them a voice. And himself, finally learning to be the father he should have been from the beginning. "Tell me about your mother," he said softly. Amara looked up, surprised. Why? Because she's part of this story too, and I want to know. So she told him. About Margaret Wilson, who'd cleaned houses before becoming a caretaker. Who'd sung gospel songs while she worked and believed that every person deserved dignity, no matter how broken their body might be. Who'd held Elena's hand during those final weeks and absorbed every word about the twins, about the plans, about the hope that refused to die. She made me promise, Amara said, her voice thick. If I ever met children who needed what Elena had wanted to give, I'd do it. She said some promises outlive the people who make them. She was right. Richard adjusted Luna in his arms as the little girl's eyes grew heavy. Elena made me promise something too. The night before she went into labor, she made me swear I'd love them exactly as they were. No conditions, no requirements for them to earn it. Did you keep that promise? No, not until you forced me to. He smiled sadly. I kept waiting for them to be different before I could love them properly. Waiting for them to walk, to talk, to be the daughters I'd imagined. You taught me they were already perfect. I was the one who needed to change. The storm raged for another hour, but eventually it passed. The power came back with a soft hum, lights flickering to life throughout the mansion. But they stayed in the candle-lit nursery, reluctant to break the spell. By the time they laid the girls down to sleep, something had shifted between them. The walls they'd both maintained, the professional distance, had dissolved. They were partners now, true partners, co-parents to two little girls who needed them both. Days later, Richard called another press conference. This time, Amara stood beside him. The reporters shouted questions before he even reached the microphone. Is it true she lied about her credentials? Are you still together despite the scandal? What do you say to accusations that this is all a publicity stunt? Richard waited for silence. When it didn't come, he simply began speaking, his voice calm and clear. 6 months ago, I had given up. My daughters lay in their cribs, and I'd accepted that they always would. I built hospitals and research centers, trying to create miracles for other people's children, because I couldn't create one for my own. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then Amara Daniels walked into my house, a woman who'd sacrificed her own dreams to care for her dying mother. A woman who knew what it meant to love someone trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. A woman who refused to accept that my daughters were lost causes. He pulled out his phone and held it up, showing a video. Clara and Luna walking hand in hand across the nursery. Not perfectly, their steps uneven and careful, but walking. Together. Talking to each other in their limited vocabulary mixed with signs. This is what she did. Not with medical degrees or expensive equipment, with patience, with love, with the knowledge her mother learned from my wife. His voice strengthened. You call it fraud that she had debts. I call it sacrifice. You say she's unqualified. I say she's the most qualified person I've ever met, because she understands what those children need in a way no textbook could teach. Amara's throat tightened as he continued. So yes, she's staying. Yes, we're running the foundation together, and yes, I trust her completely. Not because I'm blind, but because I finally opened my eyes. He looked directly at the cameras. If you want to attack her, you'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, I'm done being silent. The questions exploded again, but Richard took Amara's hand and walked away. Behind them, cameras flashed and reporters shouted, but neither of them looked back. That night, Richard found an envelope on his desk. Old, yellowed with age, sealed with wax. Mrs. Patterson had found it in Elena's belongings, tucked away in a box marked, "For later." The housekeeper had given it to Richard without comment, but her eyes had been knowing. His hands shook as he opened it. Elena's handwriting filled the page, and as he read, tears blurred his vision. My darling Richard, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But our daughters are there. And I need you to listen to me one last time. They will speak when they are loved without condition, not when they meet your expectations, not when they prove themselves worthy. When they are simply, completely loved for exactly who they are. You're going to want to fix them, to change them, to make them what you think they should be. Don't. Just love them. And if you can't do it alone, find someone who can teach you. Someone who understands that broken doesn't mean worthless. Promise me, Richard. Promise you'll let them be themselves. And promise you'll forgive yourself for whatever you think you did wrong. Our daughters don't need your guilt. They need your presence. I love you. Always. Elena. Below her signature was a postscript. If they ever call another woman Mama, don't be sad. Be grateful. It means they're loved. Richard sat at his desk holding that letter and finally allowed himself to cry. Not the angry tears he'd shed at her funeral. Not the frustrated tears when the twins wouldn't improve. These were tears of release, of forgiveness, of understanding that Elena had seen this coming and had given him permission to heal. When he looked up, Amara stood in the doorway. She'd been crying, too. How long have you been there? Long enough. She entered the room sitting across from him. She knew. Somehow she knew. She always did. He handed her the letter. Read the end. When Amara reached the postscript, her hand covered her mouth. Oh, God. She gave us her blessing. Before any of this happened, she told me it was okay. Richard's smile was watery but genuine. We're not replacing her. We're continuing her. There's a difference. Richard, Amara's voice broke. I think I'm falling in love with this family, with those girls, with this life. And it terrifies me. Good. He reached across the desk, taking her hand. Because I'm falling too. And I don't want to fall alone. They sat like that, hands clasped across polished wood. Two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and were building something new from the pieces. Outside, the mansion that had been so quiet for so long hummed with life. Upstairs, two little girls slept peacefully, dreaming in a language that was finally, beautifully their own. 1 year later, the mansion looked completely different. What had been silent halls now echoed with children's laughter. What had been empty rooms now served as therapy spaces, filled with small chairs and colorful mats, and equipment designed for growing bodies learning to move. The Elena Grace Foundation had transformed Richard's home into a demonstration center. 3 days a week, families visited, parents of children with neurological conditions, therapists wanting to learn the methods, researchers studying the combination of emotional connection and structured therapy that had helped Clara and Luna. Amara stood in the main therapy room, leading a training session for 15 nurses who'd traveled from around the country. She wore professional clothes now, not a maid's uniform. Her hair was pulled back, and confidence had replaced the uncertainty that had once shadowed her movements. The key isn't forcing progress, she explained, demonstrating a sign with a young boy who'd been born with cerebral palsy. It's creating space for connection. If a child feels seen, truly seen, they'll try harder than any amount of therapy could push them. The nurses took notes. Some recorded video. One raised her hand with a question about music integration, and Amara answered easily, drawing on the knowledge she'd gained from a year of formal study. Richard had insisted she complete her nursing degree properly this time. She'd graduated 3 months ago, top of her class. Through the window, Richard watched her teach. He'd stepped back from most public-facing work, content to handle the foundation's business side while Amara became its heart. She was a natural teacher, patient and clear, turning complex concepts into simple truth. Betty appeared beside him with coffee. The cook had become something like family over the past year, watching the household transform with knowing approval. She's something special, that girl, Betty said. Yes, she is. You planning to make it official? Richard smiled. Soon. In the garden, Clara and Luna played under the supervision of their regular therapist. At 3.5 years old, they were small for their age but thriving. Clara could walk short distances without assistance, though she still used a walker for longer trips. Luna's speech had improved dramatically. She could string together 5 or 6 words at a time now, and her signs were clear and confident. They played a game of their own invention, part tag and part conversation. Clara would sign something, Luna would respond verbally, and they'd collapse into giggles. To a stranger, they might seem delayed compared to typical children their age. To anyone who'd known them a year ago, they were miracles walking. Dr. Harrison visited that afternoon for the twins' quarterly evaluation. The neurologist who'd once dismissed Amara's methods now called her quarterly for advice on other patients. He examined both girls thoroughly, tested their responses, measured their progress. "Remarkable," he said afterward, meeting with Richard and Amara in the study. "Their latest brain scans show continued neuronal development. The pathways are strengthening, not regressing. At this rate, Clara might not need the walker by age 5. And Luna's speech centers are activating in ways we've never seen in cases like hers." "What changed your mind?" Amara asked. "About the methods, I mean." Dr. Harrison smiled ruefully. "Watching them work when everything I'd learned said they shouldn't. Medical school teaches us about the body, but nobody teaches us about the power of being loved. That was my blind spot." He gathered his files. "The paper we're publishing next month should help change some minds in the medical community. Your foundation's data is compelling." After he left, Richard and Amara stood at the window, watching the girls play. They stood close, not quite touching, but the space between them hummed with possibilities. "I have something for you," Richard said suddenly. He led her to the music room, where the piano sat in afternoon light. On its surface lay a small velvet box. Amara's breath caught. "Richard, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway." He opened the box to reveal not a ring but a key. Antique brass, worn smooth with age. This was Elena's, to her mother's house in Vermont, a little cottage on a lake. She always said she'd take the girls there someday, teach them to swim and pick berries and just be children. "It's beautiful. It's yours. Ours." He pressed the key into her palm. "I thought maybe this summer we could take them. All of us. A family vacation." The word family settled between them, warm and true. They were a family now, complicated and unconventional, born from tragedy and built on hope, but real. "I'd like that," Amara said softly. That evening, they hosted a charity gala at the mansion. 500 guests filled the grounds, dressed in elegant clothes, drinking champagne under string lights. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. They'd opened 3 satellite centers in other cities, trained over 200 therapists, helped more than 50 families see improvement in their children. But the heart of everything remained here, in this house, with 2 little girls who'd been written off as hopeless. As dinner concluded, Richard took the microphone. The crowd quieted, sensing something important. "Thank you all for being here tonight, for supporting the Elena Grace Foundation, for believing that every child deserves a chance." He paused, finding Amara in the crowd. "A year ago, I stood at another podium and told you about 2 women who changed everything. My wife Elena and Amara's mother Margaret. Women who saw potential where others saw only limitation." Amara moved through the crowd toward him, sensing he needed her beside him. "Tonight, I want to introduce you to the real miracles." Richard gestured toward the house. "Clara, Luna, come out here, please." The crowd murmured with anticipation. Most had only seen pictures, heard stories. Now the double doors opened and 2 little girls emerged, holding hands. Clara wore a red dress, Luna wore blue. They walked carefully down the steps, their gait uneven but determined, their faces bright with excitement. The crowd erupted in applause. Some people were crying. These children, these impossible children who weren't supposed to walk or talk or laugh, were standing in front of 500 people without fear. Richard knelt, bringing himself to their level. Amara did the same. The girls looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Then Luna stepped forward and took the microphone her father offered. Her voice came out high and clear, the words careful, but confident. "Hi, I'm Luna. This is Clara. We want to say thank you." More applause, but Luna held up her hand, a gesture she'd learned from watching Amara teach. The crowd quieted. Lots of people said we couldn't talk, couldn't walk, couldn't be like other kids. She glanced at Amara for reassurance, got an encouraging nod, and continued. But Ma said we could. And Dada believed her. And now we can. Clara stepped forward, signing as she spoke, her voice quieter but just as clear. "Love is the best medicine. That's what Ma always says." She's right. Together they signed and spoke their final sentence. "Thank you for helping other kids like us." The applause was deafening. Richard pulled both girls into his arms, holding them close. Amara wrapped her arms around all three of them, and cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Later, after the guests had left and the girls were asleep, Richard and Amara sat on the mansion steps, looking at the stars. The same steps where they'd stood that first morning after the storm, when everything had seemed impossible. "Elena would be proud," Amara said quietly. "So would your mother." Richard took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I've been thinking about that key, about Vermont, about taking the girls there this summer. We already talked about that. I know, but I've been thinking about something else too." He turned to face her fully. "About what it would mean to make this official, not the foundation. Us." Amara's heart hammered. "Richard, I'm not asking you to marry me, not tonight, not yet. But I'm telling you that I want to, that I love you. That somewhere between you teaching my daughters to sign and me learning to listen, I fell completely in love with you." His thumb traced circles on her hand. "You don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know." Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks. "I love you too. I think I have for a while. But I was scared. Scared you only saw me as their caretaker. Scared I was reading too much into—" He kissed her, soft and certain, tasting of champagne and promises. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. "So we're doing this?" she asked. "We're already doing it. We're just making it official." He stood, pulling her to her feet. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led her to the nursery, where both girls slept peacefully. Moonlight painted their faces silver, made them look like angels. Richard opened the drawer of the changing table and pulled out a small leather journal. Elena's journal. "I found this again last week. Reread it." He turned to a page marked with a ribbon. "Listen to this entry. I had a dream last night. I was watching the girls playing in a garden, and they were calling for someone, not me, another woman. She was laughing with them, teaching them something with her hands, and I felt so happy, so peaceful, because I knew they would be loved. Even if I couldn't be there, they would be loved." She dated this entry 2 weeks before she died. Amara's hand covered her mouth. "She saw me. Somehow she knew. Maybe. Or maybe she just knew that love finds a way." Richard closed the journal gently. "Either way, I think she'd approve. Of you. Of us. Of everything we're building here." They stood together, watching Clara and Luna sleep. Two people who'd started as employer and employee and had become something infinitely more precious. Partners. Co-parents. And soon, God willing, husband and wife. As they turned to leave, Luna stirred and mumbled in her sleep. Ma, Dada, love you. The words were slurred with sleep, but absolutely clear. Clara echoed her sister without waking. Love you. Richard and Amara left the nursery hand in hand, closing the door softly behind them. Tomorrow, the world would continue turning. The foundation would continue growing. More families would come seeking hope. More children would find their voices. But tonight, in this mansion that had once echoed with silence, a family slept peacefully. Two little girls who'd been told they'd never speak had thanked 500 people in their own words. A father who'd almost given up had learned to hope again. And a woman who'd walked through these doors as a maid had become the mother these children desperately needed. The miracle wasn't that Clara and Luna had learned to walk and talk. The miracle was that they'd always been whole, waiting for someone to see them clearly. The miracle was that love, in its purest form, could heal wounds that medicine never touched. The miracle was that sometimes, in the darkest moments, God sends exactly who you need. Not who you expect, not who makes sense, but who your heart has been waiting for all along. And in a house that had once held only grief, that miracle was remembered every single day in laughter, in small hands forming signs, in voices that weren't supposed to exist, saying the most important words of all. I love you. I love you too. We're family. The end of silence. The beginning of everything. If the people who loved you most had given up on your voice, would you still find the strength to speak? Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more stories that prove love can heal what medicine cannot reach.